Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Today we have to discuss nuclear holocaust, not because I want to, but because Joe Biden and his weakling administration has brought us to the brink of a nuclear war with Russia. And a situation that the administration and others have openly admitted is the worst nuclear threat we have faced since the Cuban Missile Crisis back in 1962. This is what happens when you have a commander-in-chief who is not in command of anything and is seen almost universally as a weakling with an addled mind and the inability to lead on anything. America is weak and everyone knows it right now, including our allies and our enemies. Weakness creates the opportunity for war to explode, and the latest example came in the last few days when Joe Biden suffered another unforced error. When he agonized about a nuclear war with Russia behind closed doors at a Democrat fundraising event, but those comments, of course, made news instantly and ratcheted up the temperature even further between Washington and Moscow.
Biden can't run for president, so he can't be president, folks. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and X-Space's simulcast. Well, with Biden out of the presidential race, the question of Biden's cognitive weaknesses on his ability to serve as the actual president becomes critical to the security of the nation. That clip was months ago. Even Dr. Sanjay Gupta of CNN is a trained neurosurgeon and has called for a cognitive review of this man. Congressman Rich McCormick, who I met personally just a few weeks ago, sat next to him on an aircraft for 2 hours, is also a doctor and a retired Marine Corps pilot, is concerned that Biden has Lewy body dementia. Even Bob Woodward, the Washington Post investigative journalist deriving his notoriety from Watergate and the takedown of the Nixon administration, is concerned that the June 27th performance was a political H-bomb regarding Biden's cognitive abilities. Well, this brings up additional nuclear issues related to the 25th Amendment. More specifically, the concern over America's nuclear command and control and our ability to conduct an adequate response if necessary. And we might just need it. Well, former senior DOD official and retired Army Colonel and author John Mills is back with us today to discuss all this and more based on his article that he wrote about the same subject. John, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, my friend.
Hey, Rob, honor to be on the show with you.
Yeah, that clip with Steve Gruber was quite a while ago. But I think it's very appropriate to lead off this show with a discussion, especially after I saw your article, I think on the 22nd or 23rd of July, not too long ago. This man, he can't run for president, so why should he be president, I think is the overarching question that you're asking, too, especially in light of his responsibilities as the nuclear force commander, the only person in America that can authorize the use of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable question to ask. And the Republicans, House Speaker Johnson, needs to absolutely force this issue and needs to force them out on the 25th, amendment, and that they should harp on that over and over again. Some people are saying, no, if you do that, that means Kamala will be president. Well, she already, it's obvious that she is already anyway. It's obvious now to everyone that Biden has not been the president for a long time, if ever. during his tenure. So what's the difference? I don't understand those who are spazzing out over Kamala being president. It's obvious she's been running things, and it's patently obvious that Biden has not been running things. And just from in that article, I went down essentially the legal responsibilities of nuclear launch, and actually, there's not a whole lot of U.S. law on it. There's just this number one presumption is that you have a functioning person occupying the president's seat.
Yeah, because he's the only one, or she, depending on who's in the chair, they're the only person that has the correct authorization codes and that has the authority to give that order. I mean, yeah, it's not written down in the law, but it's written down in the Constitution. A commander-in-chief, the commander-in-chief, not a committee of commander-in-chief, not the president and vice president as a team. It's the commander-in-chief. What are the landmines in that process that you identified that we could possibly be setting ourselves up for?
Well, we have very dangerous scenarios, and in the article also went over, assessment of foreign leaders used to be a key capability of the U.S. intelligence community. I think my understanding, those groups and personalities have largely been dissolved. We don't spend time and resources as much as we used to on that. That I can assure you China and Russia do, and they are probably taking away. Now time has changed since that article was written. Now Biden is not running for president. That was different than when I was writing the article. So the obvious question for China and Russia, who is running the U.S. government right now? And from their totalitarian and analytics point of view, they're probably seeing a window of opportunity because America apparently is does not have a functioning president at this point in time. And I think that's pretty much what's going on. We don't have a functioning president.
Do you think that the joint formation flight of Chinese and Russian strategic bombers, by strategic I mean nuclear capable, when they penetrated the air defense identification zone around Alaska and Canada last week, is a indicator of what you just talked about, that they are still studying U.S. leaders and our posture and our readiness to conduct these types of operations and defend ourselves?
During the height of the Cold War, this is based on a number of anecdotal stories from a number of senior leaders, but I've been in the room a number of times when this has been told, but there was truth to it, is every time a Russian nuclear missile sub would get closer or in larger numbers to the United States, we would very visibly roll out more B-52s onto the alert Christmas tree at SAC Strategic Air Command bases around the country. And there was this cause and effect where the Russian subs would start moving away from America or out of their known launch positions. So there's real cause and effect that the totalitarian mindset takes into these things are significant to them. And were they testing American resolve on about July 10th? It was the essentially the day after NATO called out China as the key enabler for Russia. Essentially, the only reason Russia is still in the game in Ukraine. A Chinese and Russian task force went through the Aleutians on using innocent passage. That's a legal term in the freedom of navigation and law of the ocean, and you're not allowed to essentially loiter when you're conducting innocent passage through the Aleutian Islands, for example. They clearly were loitering, and then on the 24th, this unprecedented, first of a kind joint bomber flight, two Russian Tu-95 Bears, which are nuclear capable, and then two Chinese H-6 bombers. Don't know which exact variant. The Chinese have many variants of the H-6, which is the old Russian Badger bomber. So these four aircraft flew together. Essentially, it was a right seat ride where the Russians were showing them a traditional route they've taken for years off the Aleutians. Now, we scrambled a number of fighters to escort them. But one thing I noticed when I plotted the tracks of the Chinese and Russian naval ships, and then also the Bear bombers, I noticed we have a very powerful radar called Cobra Dane out on Shemya, which is almost the furthest island in the Aleutians. Attu next door is the furthest one out, but Shemya has the Cobra Dane radar. It can see far and wide and deep into Russia and China. They never like that. It's kind of sitting out there all alone and not really protected. And I noticed that the Chinese and Russian naval assets were close by when they were doing their, again, air quote, innocent passage routine. I think we should file a protest with their embassies over that. That was not innocent passage when they clearly were loitering near a sensitive U.S. facility. And then shortly after, the bombers came by, skirting the area. So it also signaled to me, in my mind, that they were practicing, testing, decapitating that Cobra Dane radar. There's essentially no protection for that radar. Essentially, you have contract personnel. I don't believe we have any Air Force, or only just a small number of uniformed Air Force, but we don't have missiles. We don't have fighters out there. And that's at almost the very end of the Aleutians. So by the time they did something, it would be hard for us to react. They'd wipe out that radar, which would blind us to further Chinese and Russian activity.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that the Chinese and Russian flight formation of those bombers is unique and one of a kind, because I've been pointing it out from the beginning when a lot of people were saying, well, the Russians do this all the time, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but this is what was different, and that makes all the difference in the world, John. Well, we've got a hand up over in the audience. Shell is still our host over there. We'll go ahead and take that question before the first break. Go ahead, Shell.
All right, so we have a question from the audience. Colonel Gannon Burton asks, what secret deal has been made within the National Command Authority?
I assume that question's about the decision-making for a nuclear launch if necessary.
I hope.
Well, we knew about it. It wouldn't be a secret anymore. So I don't know what the secret deal has been made, but this is an absolute. This should be a constitutional crisis. Speaker Johnson should be pushing this as a constitutional crisis issue.
Colonel Rob Maness, appreciate being back on. That's, in my head, you just try to run that scenario, right? It actually gets to the DEFCON levels. Everything has escalated. Now, at this point, Speaker Johnson, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and everybody have gotten in the room and talked about how this has got to go down. And if they haven't, then we are really living in. I mean, we're already living in unprecedented biblical times, but now it's just complete bizarro where we don't even have a Dr. Strangelove council in place with a person who can actually make a decision. So some protocol has to be going. You obviously know about how where the football is. It can't be in two places at once. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Gannon, you rubber banded out on us, but just to point out, the National Command Authority is two entities: the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. And the Secretary of Defense has very little communication with the President himself, even in a formal way. If you remember, John, just to point that out before we go to the break, that he didn't even report that he was going into surgery. So I have major questions about the National Command Authority. And of course, Joe Biden. And when we come back, we're going to get the answer to the question about the 3 a.m. Nuclear crisis phone call from the administration itself, because they did give an answer to the question. And we'll be right back with retired Colonel John Mills and our audience on X Spaces simulcast. Thank you to Gannon Burton, USMC retired Colonel, for asking that question. I'll see you in a minute.
Experts say that Russian hackers found a way to hack our utilities, and the hackers may still be in there, waiting to strike.
Go after their power, go after their water, and you can bring a nation to its knees.
They're identifying targets, they're positioning malware so they could pull the trigger when they wanted to.
Experts see the intrusion as a possible precursor to an unprecedented Russian cyber attack that could, in the event of war, devastate the U.S.
We know that China has been hacking everything they can and stealing our intellectual property. They want to take down America's economy. They want to take down our morale. They understand that if they can destroy our economy, they can destroy our future. We're at war.
Well, he also said he's sharpest before 8 p.m. So, say that the Pentagon at some point picks up an incoming nuke. It's 11 p.m. Who do you call? The First Lady?
He has a team that lets him know of any news that is pertinent and important to the American people. He has someone, or that is decided obviously with his National Security Council, on who gets to tell him that news.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday here at Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast broadcast. And my guest is U.S. Army retired Colonel John Mills, and he's a former senior Department of Defense official. And John, that was the current president's press secretary right there saying, well, he's got a team if he gets that call. And I used 3 a.m. I think in the video they were talking about 11 p.m. Ducey's being kind, I think, by that. But yeah, what happens if this man he admits he can't stay up past 8 or 8:30 p.m. Eastern time? Who's making the call?
Well, every president has a team. What we're seeing exposed is the lie. There's clearly been a cover-up the entire tenure, likely, of this of Biden, that we do not have a functional president. And we have a constitutional crisis in play. Not only have they baited and switched Biden and pushed him out onto the subway tracks after the disastrous June 27th debate performance, they've essentially taken over. Well, then we can't have this person encumbering the presidential office and the presidential desk. I mean, this is unbelievable. So it's just been a lying. KJP has been lying. Kamala has been part of the cover-up, and everybody has been lying and covering up. We have a non-functional person being the president. It's now out there for everyone to see. So we can't afford 6 months of not having a president. And again, some people are, no, you can't let her do that. You can't let Kamala do this. Why not? She's by law the vice president. She needs to do that and run for the presidency if she is the one. Don't know if there's going to be another last minute switch out. But no, we have to have a president, good, bad, or indifferent. We have to have a president, and right now it's clearly not Biden. The lie has been exposed.
Yeah, it has been exposed, and I think Kamala Harris has to own that, just like she has to own all the Biden bad policies that have caused this crazy inflation, wages to be to fall in real terms. People having to worry about whether they can buy enough groceries and fill the tank of gas in the car to get to work and back. They're having to make decisions between the two, John. So she's got to own all that, especially the cover-up of Biden's cognitive abilities that whole team has to own all that. But there's something else that's come up about this him getting out of the race. I wanted to get your take on it, and I just thought of it as you were talking about that. Is that this potential blackmail through Obama as intermediary by Harris that said, "Hey, I'm going to pull the 25th Amendment trigger on you if you don't step out of the presidential race." Isn't that against the law to blackmail somebody like that? And isn't that an impeachable offense for the vice president?
Well, I don't know if that would exactly be impeachable, but it is a lie. It's truth that the American public deserves to know and has a right to know. And if they're going to, spook old man Biden with the 25th Amendment threat, they need to let the American people know about this. And it shouldn't be used as a threat. It's there as a lawful mechanism in case there is an incapacitated president. Well, if they're going to threaten to use it, that must mean there's some truth to it. So, the problem is they're not going to be truthful on this because it would expose their own lies and cover up. And who knew what when? And again, it's patently obvious to everybody now. They freaked out after the June 27th performance. Then we had the assassination attempt. Then we had the incredible RNC gathering. Then they realized, oh boy, we better do something quick. And I don't think Obama was totally on board with Kamala Harris, but they decided to go with what they got, at least for the time being. I think the longer it goes on, it'll be really harder. Every minute goes by, it's harder to swap out Kamala. All this fake, there's nothing authentic about the enthusiasm for Kamala. They have a rap concert in Georgia as a canard to trick people to coming. And as soon as the rap artist is done, people start leaving, and then they trot her out. I mean, nothing is authentic about the Dems. It's all a lie and a fraud. They have to trick people into coming to the event, and then Kamala comes out like it's some coronation. I think that we're already getting popping the balloon on Kamala and the fake enthusiasm.
Yeah, they're certainly trying to push that bubble and that balloon into the face of the American people and demoralize the Trump side. And build some kind of enthusiasm behind her, but you'll see in a couple weeks that'll all fade. But I think to your point and to Colonel Burton's point with his question about we have to set the politics of the presidential race aside at this point, and I guess it's because we're national security professionals, military officers, former commanders, all three of us that we can see that. Based on our experience, and I've been in politics for a while too, and I can still see and say, and with a straight face, that the 25th Amendment process really should be being used to remove this man from office. We have to have a president that has a functioning mind, 100%, not 70%, not even 85%. It's got to be functioning at 100% in order to do this job, especially make these critical decisions. I mean, John, last night, somebody killed the Hamas leader that was in a building in Tehran. And of course, the Israelis responded to the soccer field attack that killed all the little kids and teenagers by killing the major Hezbollah guy who happened to also be responsible for killing 241 U.S. Marines in Beirut under the Reagan administration, and we should have killed him a long time ago, in my opinion. So things are not getting better when we look at all the things that have happened just since July 13th, and they're continuing to get worse. Doesn't Speaker Johnson have a role in the 25th Amendment process? I mean, Pelosi really doesn't at this point. Other than a vote in the House, but doesn't Speaker Johnson specifically have a role? in that process if he chooses to use it?
My memory and actually read the 25th Amendment. I think it has to be initiated by members of the cabinet. So it's something that members, I think 2 members of the cabinet have to invoke that action. So I don't know. I'd have to reread it here, but I'm concerned. I think he should, if nothing else, call for hearings on it, which helps shed light on the situation. That is oversight is a role of Congress. It could be the Government Affairs Committee, but who would have oversight of the immediate executive office of the president. But he needs to bring it up as a point of order for congressional oversight. Why aren't we? Why isn't somebody invoking the 25th? This is a lie. It's a lie on the American people, and we cannot just let this go.
Yeah, and the situation calls for it. Your point about the Cobra Dane radar, that's a over-the-horizon radar, if I remember correctly, and I'm sure that the Chinese and Russians were they're measuring response, everything from how long it takes to get assets to them as potential targets to stop them, to what assets are on the ground at Shimia, which are minimal. In my most recent experience, I mean, we used to have a fairly robust air base there that flew intelligence, long-range intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance flights out of there. But we haven't done that in a very, very long time. And as far as I know, we don't have missile defense that's aimed at tactical or theater level type missile defenses in the area. And we certainly don't have an Iron Dome. So yeah, John, I mean, really, this is the criticality of the situation continues on this upward vector, and somebody in the cabinet's isn't there somebody with the courage to stand up and say, we have to think of the country and the American people and our vital national interest of homeland defense before we consider this as part of the political presidential race equation?
Yeah, you would sure hope so. But that just that's really, it appears to not be in the DNA of much of the Biden cabinet. They are in lockstep to conduct a cover-up, and haven't fired a single person. I mean, their whole strategy is never fire anybody. Now, Cheadle resigned, but one of the first things you do before you become a general officer or flag officer, or even a senior executive and a political appointee is you sign a letter of resignation, and so that the administration can just say, hey, we will accept your letter of resignation, and then they just put a date on it, boom, because you've already signed it, and that's the way these things work. So they got Cheadle out, but other than that, Biden team never fires anyone. Nobody lost their job over Abbey Gate. Nobody's lost their job over any of the incompetence in the Middle East, any of these affairs. So that's their attitude. Cheadle was the first, and there's been many egregious situations before, but they choose to just cover up together because the message is nobody's going to get fired, so everybody just hunker down, lawyer up, don't say anything, and just blow off the rights of the American people.
Not just our rights, but our defenses. I mean, it's unconscionable when I really sit down and I think about it in the silence of my office here and ponder what the Secretary of Defense, who is a retired 4-star general that has had command at, I think, every level since Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army, some of that, I think, in combat. So he's been, directly responsible in real terms for the lives of Americans under his command. What is General Lloyd Austin really thinking? We got to take another break. But when we come back, we'll hear from what President Trump and J.D. Vance are thinking about the 25th Amendment and Biden's cognitive abilities. And I want to continue this discussion and get John's take, because I think he knows General Austin probably better than I do, considering his service. And I'm interested to see what his take is on what the SecDef is actually thinking about right now. We'll be right back on Worldview 2 with the Rob Maness Show, and retired Army Colonel John Mills, our guest for today.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
You'd investigate the people that hid Joe Biden's condition?
Well, I think somebody has to look at it. Look, you had people that lied to the American public. And I tell you what, you ought to take a look at his doctors, because his doctors keep giving him this wonderful report. I'm not a doctor, but I saw him the other day, was unable to get up the children's stairs going into Air Force Ones.
Is it a coup against Joe Biden?
It's sort of, yeah.
I think it is. I mean, look, there's a constitutional process, the 25th Amendment. If Joe Biden can't run for president, he can't serve as president. And if they want to take him down because he's mentally incapable of serving, invoke the 25th Amendment. You don't get to sort of do this in the most politically beneficial way for Democrats. If it's an actual problem, they should take care of it the appropriate way.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and my guest today is former senior DOD official and author John Mills, and also retired Army Colonel. And John, you heard from Trump and Vance there. It addressed both the issues, the 25th on Vance's part, and investigating these people that have been lying to the American people that are government employees. I mean, these people are paid government employees, whether they're protecting Biden from a campaign perspective or not, doesn't really matter. And there are supposed to be principles that we follow when we're working as government employees that keep partisanship and politics out of the decision-making process, especially when it comes to national security issues like what we're talking about. And that's obviously not happening here.
Yeah, and I was reviewing the 25th Amendment. It is actually a majority under, I think it's Section 4, declaration by Vice President, cabinet members of the president's inability. So it has to be a cabinet members. Now we have, I think it's 15 cabinet offices. These are departments of U.S. government, of the executive branch. We have 15, so it have to be 8. The vice president and 8 cabinet members would have to do that. So it's a little bit of a high bar, and it's not something Johnson can do on his own, but he can absolutely conduct hearings on the topic. And but again, it means that there has been a cabal of lies, just like what President Trump just said. There's been a cabal of lies on this, and why haven't 8 cabinet members come forward with Kamala Harris to say the duties have to be transferred? And the 25th was signed and came into effect in 1965. Part of it was just a little bit of lack of clarity on the transition of power, obviously in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. So that's the genesis and heritage of this. But Yeah, I mean, I'm looking just looks like 8 cabinet members would have to align with the vice president to say, yes, this person needs to be removed because they were did not have cognitive ability, because they were comatose, because they had been kidnapped, because they were impeached. So that's really, it's a little bit of a high bar, but again, it's patently obvious at this point in time there is an absolute conspiracy to conceal from the American people the true status of Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I think that those on our side, I'm a Republican, so I'll admit it. I'm not trying to be objective here. I'm trying to get facts and truth out and give my opinion. But the 25th is being held up by Republicans too, as we can't let Kamala be president going into this election, et cetera, et cetera. Well, something I've learned in studying the 25th Amendment is that the vice president doesn't actually become the president under that amendment process. It's acting president is what the verbiage in the 25th is. So technically, no. The answer to those naysayers that are out there going, we can't do this from a political perspective. The answer is really no. We can do that, and we should do that for the sake of American national security and our people's safety and everything, because she's only going to be the acting president, and that solves that issue for them. And I just wish that we had some people with the courage to step up and do the right thing for the country. It's incredible. What do you think Secretary Austin is thinking about? Because he's a cabinet secretary too. He's a leader. Obviously, he made 4-star general, so he had to have something on the ball, and he has courage. At some point in his career, he was definitely ethical, but what is he thinking about if he's not the one stepping up to lead this effort?
Well, I don't know Austin that well, but I mean, I think we've now seen, I mean, especially with his unprecedented AWOL, absent without leave. Now, I think his chief of staff or somebody in the chief of staff office has left. I think she was a political appointee, and she was the one who kind of took responsibility for not properly informing everybody. But that whole episode was very sketchy in itself. And for a 4-star, former 4-star with that amount of experience, for them to just kind of disappear, again, a key person in nuclear command and control. I mean, this is... it reflected very poorly on Austin, and after all these years of experience, him hiding from his own boss, much less the American people, was just disgraceful. It was a very serious matter. I mean, I think he's apologized, accepted responsibility, but it's like, how do these things happen? I mean, we should never have been to this point in the first place. He was, so that this is really, it throws everything into question about his own ability to give clear, cogent guidance and make proper decisions.
Do you think that also has something to do with his inability to hold people accountable on the Afghanistan debacle? I mean, it does require a waiver from Congress for a former 4-star general to be appointed to Secretary of Defense, because those folks, those men and women with the stars on their shoulders, coming up after them, they're buds. I mean, it's a very small group of people. They all know each other.
I think we're learning. We made an exception with Mattis, who turned out to be in many ways brought in quite a broad cabal of never Trumpers. We see Austin. A lot of people don't realize that the Department of Defense is a civilian-run organization. A lot of people don't understand that, and they think, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And I've had people I've had people who should know better argue with me. There are no civilians at Department of Defense. Well, actually, we have 800,000 civilians, in addition to, I think it's 2.1 million active Guard and Reserve members, 2.1, 2.3, something like that. Yeah, there's 800,000 DoD civilians. So we got a huge core of that. And Department of Defense is run by civilians. And Goldwater Nichols in 1986, made that very clear. DoD is not run by admirals or generals. And I think there is potentially some good wisdom not having a former general or admiral in that position, because so far we're 2 for 2 that it didn't really totally always work out. I'm not talking Mattis's tenure or being a total disaster, but it was clear there was issues going on, and he finally left and took a lot of his never-Trumpers with him. But Austin too, we're 2 for 2 on, you know what, maybe these, not saying it should never happen, but we should think long and hard before we allow it to happen again.
Yeah, I agree. They seem to make better secretaries of state. I'm thinking of George Marshall and Colin Powell than they have secretaries of defense, and even those guys had issues, especially Powell with the whole Iraq War presentation at the United Nations and those kind of things. But to get back to the nuclear command and control, Austin is the second half of the National Command Authority, and that term comes out of commanding and controlling nuclear forces for the United States of America. If he's AWOL, like he was when he went into that surgery, or if he's, and I think this is what one of the root causes of that is it's indicative of maybe the lack of communication between the president's office and the Secretary of Defense's office, because Biden seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, to rely more on Blinken at the State Department for national security decision making than he does on his own Secretary of Defense. And maybe Austin's cut out of that loop so much so that he didn't feel like it was his place to let his boss know that he was going into surgery. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a basic challenge. I think we need a more robust Department of State. It's very thinly staffed. We only have, people don't understand, we have only 9,000 foreign service officers. It's a very small number. It's under 10,000, I'm pretty sure, to cover the entire world. I mean, and, for a number of years in Afghanistan, I mean, even though State Department was by law in charge of Afghanistan, not Department of Defense, State Department was. I mean, you had a very large military staff and just a handful of State Department people. So I'm all for a more robust State Department. And I think if we spent more money on State Department up front, we'd probably could reserve Department of Defense for coming in when we just can't fix anything else other than with military force. I think that's been part of the problem, is and especially with the Obama-Biden team, is no matter what the question is, the answer was Department of Defense. And I think part of that is an understaffed State Department, under-resourced, understaffed. So I'm all for a more, there's a reason we call it DIME, diplomatic, information, military, economic. These are the instruments of national power. The first choice should always be D for diplomacy. And so this is the problem. This is the Madeleine Albright, who was Secretary of State during the Clinton years. She looked at her department and she looked at DOD and she just said words to the effect, you have this magnificent DOD that has so many resources. Let's use it. Let's use it for peacemaking, peacekeeping, all these foreign adventures. This is where we got the Kellogg, Brown and Root KBR life support contract, because of all these peacekeeping endeavors, which is how we got Halliburton, KBR involved in all these things, because we needed a contractor to provide all the base functions and all these dalliances around the world. So I'm all for a more robust State Department, and we need passionate behavior. I mean, to be honest, I think the best, and I know some people would beg to differ, but the Dulles brothers, I think were effective as both CIA and State Department heads. But I think it was really Pompeo who did the best job of being a passionate leader at State Department. Everybody else has been very more passive, caretaker-like.
Yeah, well, what I don't want to see anymore is a Secretary of State making national security decisions and being the front man when we're talking about using military force and those kinds of things, because that's just the wrong place for that to be focused on. It should be the Secretary of Defense that's leading that effort. And I think we could get away from this leading with combat force to try to pressure people around the world into doing what we want. We got to take our last break, John. When we come back, though, I want to move this discussion towards more of why isn't Biden leaving office? And I got a feeling it may be about money. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. My guest is retired U.S. Army Colonel John Mills.
A lot of people are having great success with a weight management program with Bella Trim, but it's just a tool. In terms of ingredients, Chromex or chromium picolinate improves the actions of insulin, so you have better glucose management, and in addition, it promotes fat utilization. Fat utilization or fat burning is also a feature of metabolite, which are two botanicals that stimulate a switch called AMP kinase. And so you tend to burn fat, reduce belly fat or visceral fat. Who doesn't want that? Metabolite has the ability to stimulate satiety or reduce those cravings. That's really very, very important. And it does that by raising GLP-1 levels. In addition, we've addressed the microbiome by using prebiotics. Healthier microbiome, better weight management.
Well, I think some are. That was exactly my point. When Robert Hur put out his report stating that Joe Biden was forgetful and was not able to stand trial, I wrote to Merrick Garland and said, it is now time to start the 25th Amendment proceedings through the cabinet. Joe Biden, if he can't stand trial, he cannot be commander-in-chief. He cannot be the president of the United States. This is the most important job in the world. And to have someone that's that compromised and that incapable of doing that job, he must be taken out by his own cabinet. But they continued, as did Kamala Harris. They perpetuated this cover-up, this lie about Joe Biden's condition. We saw it laid bare in the debate. We saw Joe Biden faltering. We've continued to see him decline even more rapidly than he did in the first couple of years. It's getting worse. And now you see a recalcitrant, stubborn Joe Biden who does not want to leave the presidency. Is it Joe Biden? Is it Jill? Is it Jim? Is it Hunter? Is it the family that has lived off the largesse of being in public office because of Joe Biden for the last 50 years? They're making money. What are the Democrats going to do? Keep Joe Biden in there and have him falter? I know, actually, they probably want him out. And so I'm doing this. This is not a Republican desire. This is a desire to stand up for the American people. This guy cannot be the president, make the critical decisions. We have wars raging in Israel every single day. People have forgotten about that. I met with hostages today. Their families are still in harm's way. We don't even know if some of them are alive. We have a war in Europe. We have China on the march. We have a president who's talking about energy, made in China policies that is hurting Americans, hurting American businesses. And as a small business owner from upstate New York, this is devastating to us, and this is problematic. He needs to resign. He needs to move on, and they've got to stop the cover-up.
Well, you mentioned.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast, and it's Whistleblower Wednesday, and that was Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from New York talking there. I'm going to ask my guest, retired Army Colonel John Mills about this, but and highlighting the money and the largesse that the Biden family has been able to gather over the 50 plus years of Joe Biden's political career. And John, I think there is some logic to the point that some people make that Biden is the way he is, soft on China, essentially, because of all the money that we've seen and confirmed that Hunter Biden has gotten for the family from the Chinese Communist Party. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, we've not had a serious investigation. I mean, FBI is sitting on, I think it's the FD 1025s. I think those are the, I can't remember. I think it's the FD 1025s. We got Treasury has the suspicious activity reports over 100. Yeah, it's a full-blown cover-up, and we have, most mere mortals would not survive after one or two suspicious activity reports from Treasury, which are flagged financial transactions that are of grave concern. So, yeah, I think that's an absolutely reasonable. It's not a crazy conspiracy charge. It's look, we have a lot of evidence out there. It's just a full-blown cover-up by the government, the deep state, to protect Biden. This is how he's gotten through many years in Congress. This is how AOC has came into Congress as a waitress. Nothing wrong with that. That's a noble job and purpose, but now is a multimillionaire from my understanding. So it's just, there are different ethics rules with Congress that are not quite the same as the executive branch or even the judicial branch, and so they get away with a lot, and they're able to receive legally a lot of money, but there's also clearly illegal money that's been received, and there's been no serious attempt to investigate, and the Department of Justice has just sat on everything that they have on Biden.
Yeah, and even President Trump mentioned just before we came on the air, I was watching his appearance at the Black Journalism Conference in Chicago that he was invited to speak to. Even he mentioned, the protection of the deep state. He didn't use that term, the protection that was given to Joe Biden for his classified documents case. And some of those documents were at the Penn State Center that the Chinese had access to. So whether it's willful protection or protection because Prosecutor Herr said the man just wouldn't be able to be prosecuted because he's just not cognitively there enough, and which gets back to the original proposition of your article and this show is, why is he still president of the United States? But I mean, is 6 months of more money that going to be that much though? I mean, the man really, he's being accoladed on the political side for stepping out of the presidential race as doing a service to the country and all that. It should be the opposite. He should be stepping out of the presidency for the good of the country, and I'd give him all kinds of accolades for that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think it's the right thing to do if he cared about the country, and he's not doing the right thing. So I think that reflects on his worldview on how he approaches things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why you wrote a book on the deep state and the war with the deep state. Let's talk about your two books. Well, we've got a few minutes left in the program here, John. We haven't really talked about them today at all yet. Your first book was The Nation Will Follow, and second was The War on the Deep State. Why did you write The Nation Will Follow?
Well, The Nation Will Follow was me finding myself in the middle of the Trump coup when it was candidate Trump, and then as it transitioned to President Trump, and a full-blown effort to oust him. I mean, it's become somewhat prescient and foretelling of what we would be going through. And I realized I had a lot of government people, careerists, and politicals that were lying about things. And again, the early days of Trump, Russia, were started, were shared at high level meetings starting in early 2016 when it was just candidate Trump. And turns out the source of a lot of that information was the FBI Director of Counterintelligence at the New York field office, Charles McGonigal. He was the guy feeding the interagency meetings on this topic and going tee-hee. Well, then guess who was paying McGonigal? It was Russia. And people are going, well, why would Russia pay a dirty FBI counterintelligence officer? Well, you got to understand the Russian psyche. They want to make everybody to think even bigger of them. They have a lofty view of their role in the world. So they want people to talk about them like that, even if it means paying somebody. And it was pathetic. But there was that, and realizing I was in a full-blown coup, and doing my best to get this information to the Durham investigation. And now we have the second book was about the development of the mass surveillance system, 2007 to 2014, which has become the foundation for DHS spying and working with DHS and FBI working with big tech. And now that they've been somewhat outed, a lot of the illegal activity is pivoted over to State Department and the Global Engagement Center. But this mass surveillance system I describe in the second book, War Against the Deep State, was really provided the foundation for the rise of the unlawful fourth, fifth, and sixth branches of government, the administrative state, the marriage of big tech with federal law enforcement intelligence, and then the rise of the nonprofits.
Yeah, and as an expert in the administrative state, John, we have just a minute here. Let me ask you what your thoughts are on the Supreme Court decision overturning the Chevron deference policy.
Well, I think has really driven the stake through the heart of the administrative state, which actually is based on law. The 1946 Administrative Procedures Act is the process by which a law becomes regulation, and it's been weaponized over the years. The Chevron doctrine from ruling from the 80s essentially was courts would defer to a bureaucrat for interpretation of law as it applies to regulation. And we realized, no, we got too many bureaucrats creating law from regulation. No, law has to be precise. It has to be clear. It has to be specific. You can't just start to do several orders of interpretation to say that's what the law means. No, I mean, law has to be pretty clear. And for many years, I mean, and still to this day, I mean, Congress is lazy and writes very vague laws, which leads to these situations. Lets bureaucrats interpret them. That was never the intent, to let bureaucrats interpret and make law out of regulation, which is what EPA has been beat down on severely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, sir, for coming on today. It's been a great discussion, getting the word out on these issues, which are critically important to the United States and the defense of our people, really, and our way of life. Something's got to be done. We appreciate you. Look forward to having you on again next time. And tomorrow, it's Truth Thursday. Mark Tapson, who's a fellow on the popular culture for the David Horowitz Freedom Center, wrote an article about the 2024 Olympics turning into a massive demonic pride parade. So we'll be talking about that and the mockery of the Last Supper and Jesus Christ, and the Book of Revolutions, really, because there was a pale horseman in some of those videos. So I'll see you tomorrow right here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast on the Rob Maness Show.